Today on Call It for Two, a quick spoiler-free review of Guilty, Monaco 1955. How does the second box in this new series compare to the first? Stay tuned to find out. Guilty Monaco 1955, as I said, is the second box in the Guilty series. It just came out in November 2024. I purchased it for about $15 to $20 on Amazon. I purchase all the games we play on this channel myself, and I have no relationship with any publisher. We did play both of these games on the channel. This last one took us about 12 hours to play through. It won't take you that long, but you should probably expect 3 to 4 hours. I would rate it at a difficulty of maybe 4 out of 5. It is a hard game. It does have minor use of the internet, just if you want to do a little bit of research here and there, but really most of the overwhelming time you'll spend here is just with cards on the table. Now, you can only really play it once. It's a mystery. At the end, you'll have to answer questions to prove how well you understand the case, but nothing gets destroyed, so you will be able to pass it along or sell it. Okay, I've said this is going to be a spoiler-free review, but I do need to show you inside the box to give you some idea of the intricacy of this game and the art, which is really quite phenomenal. So I'm going to show you sort of the first cards you would see if you just started playing. I'm not going to give away any answers or anything like that. If you're really sensitive about seeing anything, which I don't think you should be, you could use your timestamps to skip away or just take my bottom line advice and go buy this game and stop watching now. But assuming you want to see a little bit, let's open up this box. Let's take a real look at these contents because I think it's informative to see how this game sort of evolves these small box mystery games like Suspects. So we've got a couple decks of cards, a little hidden envelope. We won't take a look at that. And a little playing board, which is not common with these card-based mystery games. And it's not really important. It doesn't provide much information to you, but gives you a little place to lay out your cards. You've got your main oversized story cards, about 110 or so of these. We're going to take a look at a couple of these in a second. And then one of the innovations of this game that works really well is this time deck that keeps track of time passing. And when you run out of time cards, you've reached the end of the case and you'll have to answer questions. You will not have time to see all of the story cards. So part of the gameplay is making decisions about where to go, who to talk to, what to do in an efficient way so that by the time you run out of time, you can answer questions. You can see there are spaces here for different locations that you can visit, and that helps you organize your cards. What you can't see, and what I'm not going to show you, is on the flip side of this, is where you have the finale and answer questions. And it's actually very clever. And there's a pattern here comparing Monaco 1955 to the first game in this series, Guilty Houston 2015, which is all of the good aspects of Houston 2015 that I liked are ramped up to 11 here. So when you reach the end of time and you flip this over, you'll actually go through a series of questions and decisions. And this game is very much framed like a movie, like a heist movie. And So it's sort of cinematic how you have this confrontation and showdown and answering questions, and you answer questions with cards, and different things could happen depending on if you get things right or wrong. It's really quite a special experience. So this thing about when you get to the finale, you flip this over and then you have a different kind of little mini ending scenario is pretty cool. Now, I want to walk through the rule book with you. And again, it's a spoiler alert, but this is just exactly what you would read when you start the game. So you're taught the basic rules here of the game, which are fairly straightforward. It's explained very well. It's basically just a couple symbols you have to remember to notice. One, it tells you when to go get a card by number, when to put away a card by number. You've got a symbol that means you have to do this new thing now, like draw a new card. Frequently, you'll see these on the time deck. You'll be told when to advance time. You'll advance time. Occasionally, you'll get a card on here that forces you to turn over another card. There's a new mechanic here where, depending on where you are, you might not be able to read the text on the back of these. I'll show you the first one because there's a little thematic gimmick that happens with these cards. And then you've got the little introduction to the case, which we'll skip, but we will read these beginning instructions because I do want to get you out and show you a set of the initial cards. Okay, so let's just look at the initial cards for a second. Another reminder of the rule, but then here's a new twist from the previous game, which is an interaction system, a way you can ask people about cards or combine cards. Now, we've seen something like that in Suspects, which is sort of the series that you can now get in 3 different boxes, and you can watch my reviews of Suspects, as a way of combining cards by lining them up. But I do think that this new Guilty box takes that to another level, and it works very well, and I'll show you. So there's a little reference guide to combining cards, and you can see how it works. It's the same lining up like in Suspects, but if you look at Suspects, on some cards there are lines, and if you can line up 2 cards and connect the lines, then there's typically a number on the left and a number on the right. You read that card. But one of the consequences of that system is it's very obvious when you see a card that you can line up, and you can almost, even just if you've got 2 cards different on the table, you can see that they potentially might line up. This system is much more pervasive and subtle, and it works basically the same way, although any given card might have multiple places to line up on the left and multiple whole set of digits that are on the right. And I'll show you one example of lining them up. And so sometimes they don't line up. Often they will line up, and you'll read out. It'll give you a card number to read. We'll look at that in a second. Okay, so when you start the game, it'll instruct you to bring out these 2 cards. Again, this is just showing you the initial thing, so you can just see how this works. So these cards have this symbol, so this is where they live. And on your turn, what you do is you just pick a card to look at. So you can see the beautiful art on the backs of these cards, but then you'll pick a card. Let's say you wanted to go to your motorcycle. This is stuff you're going to do on the first turn, so I'm not really giving anything away. But okay, so you visit this card. So you read it. This is telling you to advance time when you read it. But before we do that, let me just show you how common it makes use of this new system in a way that Suspects doesn't. These are items. On this card, you've got a lamp, gasoline, and boots. And basically, when you want to use these items on something, combine items, or ask someone about something, you'll line them up like this, and you'll look for matching numbers. Nothing on this card, but I'll show you. So often you'll get cards with paperclip pairs on the left and numbers on the right, which means you can ask someone about something. Like if you've got a person, you can ask this person about these objects, or ask one person about another person. You can use a card as an object or a subject. And this use of these interactive object cards to do a sort of like a point and click adventure comes up a lot in this game. And it's so subtle that it'll sometimes take some real attention to realize you can ask someone about something else. Okay, so now time passes. I want to read you the first card here, just because it sets the tone and there's a narrative story thing that I want to explain to you. So you're in Monaco, 1955, at a Grand Prix, at a race. And so while you're playing this race, these announcers are announcing this race. So that is sort of flowing through the game as you play, as a narrative device. And what you'll find when you're playing is there's real attention to history here. You're going to meet real historical people, hear real historical news items. It's a there's lots of little layers going on in this game, and the real world historic flavor here is rich. Okay, the game tells you to go to Port Hercules, so I'm going to go there right away just so you can see. This tells you to draw card 14 and card 4. Now 14 is a person, so I want to show you this. There's no doubt you're gonna go here right in the beginning. So let me just show you this. And just to show you, we won't worry about the details of reading, but this is an example of the numbers on the right and the paper clips on the left. So you can imagine if you have a bunch of people, you can ask them about each other. And if you wanted to see if you had anything to say about the lamp, or if you could use the lamp on him, you'd line up these cue cards and see if these paper clips matched anywhere. So no, you can't ask him about the lamp or use the lamp on him. Same thing with the boots, etc. But you'll be doing this a lot. And they're subtle enough and common enough on cards that it is a little bit of a challenge to realize who you can ask about what. And remember, you don't have time to do everything. Everything takes time. So asking someone about something takes time. Using someone with something takes time. And you've got limited time. So you will be stressed out about trying to make decisions efficiently. Now, you can't often do it rationally. You can't often figure out what's the smartest, most efficient thing to do. So often you're making decisions with some tension, but maybe not a great way to make an efficient decision, but enough of the time you can for it to make a difference. Different groups will have slightly different experience with this game based on the choices and the decisions they make. So anyway, more cards will come out in more locations, and you'll be visiting places, and occasionally you'll have to make a decision that's more psychological. But you get some idea of the amount of text on these cards. They're text heavy. There's a lot of detail in a lot of circumstance. There's text on the time cards. There's text on all of these cards. There's text on the conversation cards. The art is beautiful, but it plays second fiddle to the text, which is rich and detailed. And there's lots of little extra clever new mechanics and rules that I'm not going to spoil for you. But it really is quite an extraordinary little world system that's being put together here. And it is deep and rich. It took us 12 hours to play through. We had some serious moments where we had to stop and try to work out what's really going on? What did that mean? What's the consequence of that? You are trying to solve a mystery here. It's not a typical murder mystery, which is nice. Like I said, it's sort of like a heist movie, and it captures that vibe well. So I really can't say enough good about this box. I was a real fan of Guilty Houston 2015, and this one, in my opinion, is better, significantly better, and a really special experience. The card interaction is done very well. It's fun to talk to people about each other, about objects. It's fun to mix up the mystery solving with the object interaction, sort of adventure game stuff, but it's all puzzly. It's all feels like there are things to unravel and figure out and understand. I love the little sprinkling of real history here. I love the attempt to make this like a movie with this dual track of this race going on while your mystery is happening. You sort of never know who to trust here. Lovely feeling. The clock, I love. It creates tension. It's a good example of how limiting how much the players can see, not letting them see everything really does ramp up it puts more stress on the decision making in a good way. And I worried in the first box, Guilty Houston 2015, one of my real concerns was I felt like after we played through it, that this mechanic where you limit what cards players can see, I felt like knowing the cards, having played it, that some groups could have a bad experience because they didn't see enough of the critical cards. So to me, that illustrated the danger of not letting players see all the cards. It really felt like there was a critical card. If you missed, you would have a bad experience. I think that's still a little bit of a possibility here, but maybe a little bit less so. I think maybe the game has made a little bit more of an effort to ensure that you can't get stuck having not seen some critical cards, although I'm not really sure that some groups couldn't have an unlucky bad experience because they chose through no fault of their own not to look at certain cards. On the other hand, I think one of the ways that this game makes up for it, contrary to the first box, is that this really does feel a little bit like there's a cool adventure-y type epilogue wrap-up ending to this movie. And so you really are going to be asked to solve this case, to explain what happened. But the ending is much more interactive and interesting in a way that it's not like answer this question and then turn over to reveal whether you're right or wrong. It's more like make some choices based on your understanding of the case. And the behind the scenes system is working a little bit hard to make sure you don't that you have, if you've missed anything, it's going to give you enough nudges and hints to put you on the right path. And even if you don't quite go on the right path, if you've missed some stuff, I think you're going to have a fun, entertaining end to the story. And that's a very clever idea here. And it's really, everything here is very deftly managed. It's really quite special. And it took them years to finish this case, and you can see why. It's really little intricate gears happening here. And I do think you may have some memorable experiences if you take your time here. If you really take breaks, this is a long, detailed game. You should not try to rush through this. Much better if you play this with a group of people, at least two, so that you can really take breaks and talk it out. Talk out what's happening, and try to figure out the details of what's going on. Tons of little subtle details and different ways, different subsets of information to see that will require different challenges for you to figure out. I will say that I loved the setting and the theme and the story. Some of the people that played with me, I think, may have preferred Houston 2015. It's a very different sort of world. Houston 2015 was set in a very small locale where you're talking to the same people over and over again, and sort of like almost like a closed room mystery. This is much more of an open world, sprawling thing with a couple different acts. For me, they're both good, but for me, this one is superior, but not everyone agreed. So, bottom line, for me, an amazing experience, great stuff. However, I am reminded that when we did get to the end of this case and read the solution, and there's a nice detailed explanation for everything after you finished, there were aspects of the solution that really were kind of like, well, that does not seem plausible. That does not seem right. That's a little cartoonish. And that's not infrequent to have that in these kinds of games. But I would say there's different kinds of two different classes of players who play mystery games. There are those that, well, all of us enjoy being perplexed and chewing on something and try to reconcile what appear to be irreconcilable facts. And in the very, very best of cases, when you get to the end, you read it and everything clicks into place and you say, I couldn't have been any other way. Now it makes complete sense. Having known the solution, all the other pieces fit in, and that makes sense that that was the answer and that's how they did it and why they did it and that was the motive and all that. Everything works, clicks in perfectly, and it feels incredibly satisfying. Even if you didn't figure it out, it still works. Then there's the majority of the cases. And the majority of the cases, of the good cases, the bad cases just fall apart. But the majority of the good cases, you read the solution and you're like, oh, that's a little far-fetched. You really stretched plausibility in order to make a confusing, interesting case. And I do think when you get to the end of this one, you're going to be like, really? That's really the answer? That's really stretching it. It feels like unrealistic or whatever. There are real elements of that in this case. There are details here at the end that may leave you skeptical. Now, some people are very sensitive to that. And when they get to that, they're like, this whole case was bullshit. If you're that kind of person, I think there's a chance you'll get to the end of this and be frustrated. I think you're better off with these games really enjoying the ride and embracing the idea that it's all going to make sense at the end and trying to take it seriously and figure things out. If you do that, I think you'll have a great time while you're playing. There were lots of times when we played this game where we were working on one theory and then we had to switch. And I encourage you to sort of theorize, come up with theories as you play, take breaks, discuss, try to figure things out early and then refine and adjust your theories. And when we got to the end, you just shrug and say, okay, it's a little bit cartoonish. That's how you make a game. And I think if you can do that, if you can keep a good attitude about the end solution, this is really a phenomenal case. If you can't, then possibly this one is not for you, or possibly if you're not willing to commit some serious attention and time and focus, then I could see how you could get frustrated here. But for the experienced players, this is not the first mystery game you should try, but for experienced players, I think there's something really special here. And I cannot wait to play the next game in the Guilty series. So for me, a 10 out of 10, really a special, memorable experience. Play with the group, don't play solo if you can help it. If you like Suspects and you're ready to ramp up your experience, this is a nice next step. Take it seriously, and I'll see you on the next video.